Hello friends, Tom Downey here for NFL Daily. Let's take a look at the NFL head coaching hot seat, the top 10 coaches who are most in danger of being fired, starting at number 10 and going down to number 1. Now before you get big mad at me Niners fans, I don't think Shanahan ends up getting fired. But we're going through the top 10 and let's be real here. The Niners' expectations have changed in the past couple seasons, and they haven't lived up to them. Now, in large part, that's because of injuries. They played 3 different quarterbacks last year. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. But look at what Shanahan's done so far. It hasn't been that great for the first 2 seasons. So maybe that changes in year 3. I think it does. And if Jimmy G gets hurt again, it's kind of a wash of a season 2. But what happens if Jimmy G stays healthy for all 16 games and the Niners only win 5? I don't think that happens, but I think that's a reasonable question to ask. So I don't think the Niners are in danger of firing Shanahan, despite some reports of some conflict between Shanahan and John Lynch. But he does check in at number 10. Another coach I think is definitely more on the safer side, Sean McDermott, number 9. I love what the Bills have done. I think they're a sleeper playoff team even out in the AFC East. But the future sits on the shoulders of Josh Allen. I like their offensive coordinator. I do think the Bills are on the rise after kind of a reset last year, but if they don't show a similar mark, if they don't improve, maybe the Bills start to wonder about McDermott's future. Now, again, much like Shanahan, I like the way this team is building, but if there's regression or if they don't improve, maybe he gets just a little bit hotter in terms of that seat going forward. Now, we can all assume, and even though I know what happens when you assume, I think it's a reasonable one, that New England will win the AFC East. So which team will finish second? Type D for the Dolphins, not feeling that one. J for the Jets, and B for the Bills. I kind of like the way Buffalo's building. So I know we put McDermott on there, but I don't think the Jets would fire Adam Gase after 1 year. Although maybe that wouldn't be the most shocking thing in New York. But I'll put the Bills there as my favorite to finish second in the AFC East and maybe make a little playoff run. Let's move then to number 8, a step forward in terms of the actual hotness here on the seats. Doug Marrone. It was not that long ago the Jags were super close to winning the AFC and going to the Super Bowl. Then they regressed this past year, and the pressure is now on Marrone. He has Nick Foles as his new head coach, or as his new quarterback. But Marrone, he's kind of been a 500 guy across his NFL career, both with the Bills and with the Jags. Now, if they finish 9 wins, I think he'll be safe. But if the Jags have a rough season, and the offensive coordinator curse of John DeFilippo continues, maybe Marrone ends up getting ousted and Tom Coughlin finds a new guy to lead his organization, because I kind of assume it's going to be Coughlin running the shots on the next head coach. Number 7, Matt Patricia. Some people wanted him fired last year. I didn't see the Lions doing that. They finished 6-10 last year. I think they have to get better. They made it very clear that the 9-7 marks or so under Jim Caldwell were not good enough. They were not good enough for Detroit. Then they regressed to 6-10. That's certainly not good enough. Now, there were some reported issues in Detroit with some players and Patricia. They got a bunch of new players in. They kind of overhauled that roster. Maybe it works out this season. But if Patricia wins 6 games again, I know that he's Bob Quinn's guy. You got a tough time justifying that to the fan base, because the fans were told, and I think rightfully so, we weren't good enough under Jim Caldwell, but we're going to keep a coach that regressed. He doesn't have to win 10 games to keep his job, but the Lions need to make a playoff push, or it might be a short tenure for Matt Patricia. And certainly the Detroit media aren't the biggest fans. And frankly, that is a factor. Number 6, Dan Quinn. Again, not long ago, Falcons were in the Super Bowl. They should have won that game, but they regressed to 7-9 last year. Won the game they should have lost. Might have gotten Ahmed Oliver. It's okay. Teams don't want to tank. I get that. I still believe in Dan Quinn, but after regression last year, if they miss the playoffs again in the middle of their window, that's not going to go over well. So I like Dan Quinn. I have faith in him. I blame the injuries last year on defense. But it is a what have you done for me now league. It is a results-based league. At a certain point, you don't have much leeway, even if you want to blame the injuries. The same is true for number 5, Jay Gruden, who, by the way, is the longest tenured coach under Dan Snyder, which is weird because he hasn't actually been there that long. But that's the nature of Dan Snyder, so maybe he's due. Now, I kind of thought the Redskins were going to make the playoffs last year, and then Alex Smith got hurt, and the quarterback room fell apart. McCoy got hurt. They tried Mark Sanchez. It was a total disaster. But a 35-44-1 record is not good enough. Only one playoff berth for the Redskins. Now, maybe that changes this year, but what happens if Jay Gruden goes 7-9 again? I think a very possible outcome. Dan Snyder does not have a long leash. Maybe he decides to say, you know what, Jay, I'm sorry, we got to make it. You're gone. We're going to bring in somebody else to build around Dwayne Haskins. So I ask you, will Jay Gruden be the Redskins head coach in 2020? Type Y for yes, N for no. I'm going to lean with no. Even if the Redskins play well this year, it's a tough NFC East. Giants not really counting there. Maybe they only win 7 games. If that's the case, I think that's a reasonable outcome, not even a hater outcome. That might not be enough for Jay Gruden to keep his job. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Number 4, Mike Tomlin. Look, I think he's a little bit overrated. He's had a really good roster the past couple of years, but he lost Lev Bell, lost the run. Frankly, at times last year, that locker room was not in great shape. Now, if Tomlin gets fired, I think somebody snatches him up real quick. Like he gets hired that year. But after missing the playoffs for the first time since 2013, what happens if Pittsburgh misses it again? I think that is maybe not the most likely outcome, but that's a plausible outcome. And if you're Pittsburgh, I don't think you're going to stand for Mike Tomlin missing the playoffs in back-to-back years in the middle/the end of Big Ben's window. I just think maybe his seat's a little bit hotter than we want to really admit out there. Now, today's show brought to you guys by BetDSI, the internet's #1 sportsbook. Head over to chatsports.com/bet and use that promo code LIVE120 for a 120% deposit bonus. If you think I'm hating on your team, I'm not trying to. Maybe some of the coaches, but not trying to hate on your team. Go bet on them. They got Super Bowl odds for every team out there. Chatsports.com/bet, promo code LIVE120. Number 3 then, Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron. Hasn't won a playoff game in a couple of years. And yes, there were injuries last year, much like the Falcons of Dan Quinn and Jay Gruden and Washington. But they collapsed. I mean, they were in great shape to make the playoffs 6-2, and then the rest of the way. Totally fell apart. Now, if Cam Newton's fully healthy, that's going to put Carolina in good shape. But that's a very tough NFC South division. What happens if Carolina goes 7-9 again? He's overhauled the coaching staff multiple times. He's still going to call the plays on defense this year. Look, the Bucks going to stop with Ron Rivera this year. So if Carolina misses the playoffs, might be time for a regime change in Carolina. So which coach has the hotter seat? We'll go to the NFC South here. Ron Rivera and Dan Quinn. Type R for Ron Rivera, and Q for Dan Quinn. I kind of lean towards Quinn, obviously, or for Ron Rivera, obviously, because he's number 3 on my list. But I think you can make an argument there for Dan Quinn as well. Number 2, Mike Zimmer. I like him a lot as a coach. But let's not kid ourselves. The Vikings have underachieved the past couple of years. Just the one playoff win in the 5 years, and they totally missed the playoffs last season. Look, I thought they upgraded at quarterback, going from Case Keenum to Kirk Cousins, and then they missed the playoffs. They've got to step it up. If Minnesota fails to make the postseason or are one and done, maybe you see Chris Spielman say, you know what, Mike, we're going to go in a different direction here. Now, I think Zimmer would not last long, be it for a DC role or for a head coaching role, but he's got to have more production. Again, I like the coach, but Minnesota should be competing for Super Bowls, not finishing around 500. Now, speaking of Super Bowls, that's the expectation, fair or not, for Jason Garrett. Now, on one hand, he's been pretty steady. Hasn't had a losing record since 2015, but the Cowboys are tired of 9-7 and 8-8 and 10-6 and winning one game in the playoffs at most and then getting bounced. Jason Garrett enters the final year of his contract. That is the most obvious you're coaching for your job now, Jason, out there. There are a lot of outlets out there that don't even list Jason Garrett on the coaching hot seats. He has to be number 1. This is the only viable number 1 option when it comes to coaching hot seats in the NFL. It is do or die time for Jason Garrett. Either he makes a deep playoff run, or he's probably gone. Now, there are some exceptions, i.e. they go like 13-3, and then Dak tears his ACL in the first round of the playoffs, a la Carson Palmer and the Bengals and Kimo Van Ohoffen, and, Garrett gets another 7 years, and oh my God, he is Marvin Lewis. Okay, yeah, that's kind of a terrifying thought right there. All right, so will Dallas make it to the NFC Championship? Type 1 for yes, 0 for no. That might be the bar this year, again, barring some injury exceptions. Let me know in the comment section. 1 for yes and 0 for no. And then we'll recap the top 10 coaches most on the hot seat this year. Number 10, Kyle Shanahan. Number 9, Sean McDermott. I feel pretty safe about those two. Doug Marrone, number 8. Matt Patricia, number 7. Dan Quinn, number 6. They got to show some improvement this year. Jay Gruden, number 5. Mike Tomlin, number 4. Ron Rivera, number 3. Mike Zimmer, number 2. Those 4 guys, they might be in playoffs or bust mode, again, barring some injury exceptions. And then number 1, I think it's a no-brainer, Jason Garrett. Another question here. Who will be the first NFL head coach fired this year? Hugh Jackson, the easy winner last year. Who will it be this year? Maybe it's Ron Rivera if the Panthers start slow. If the Cowboys start like 1-5, maybe Garrett gets the axe. Let me know what you guys think, though, in the comments section.